Hey there, and welcome to the very last HomaJam live for season 5 or volume 5. I'm very thrilled today to be joined by a couple of very esteemed guests, not one but two today. And those are from the team from Google, and I'm going to invite them on in just a sec. But before we go any further, just a reminder that the cutoff date is Wednesday 22nd, so just a few more days to get your jam submissions in. So be sure to do that final last sprint and push, and we're really looking forward to start testing all your games and seeing what you guys have been cooking up for us. So, without further delay, we are excitingly being joined by two people from the Google team today. So I'm going to just invite them on now. So, welcome to the stream, Aurelie and Aurelie B and Aurelie C from the Google team. Welcome and thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.
Hi, Kevin. Hi, everyone.
So yeah, we got some really cool stuff coming up from you guys today. But before we get into any of your presentations, could you, starting with Aurelie B, we're saying, would you just mind introducing yourself real quick and letting everybody know what you do there at Google?
Yes, of course. So I'm Aurélie, and I am leading the mobile gaming vertical growth here in Paris, meaning that I look after some of our bigger studios and game publisher and help them really leverage the best of Google solutions to grow the games that they have.
Perfect. And Aurelie C?
Yes, Aurélie Chazal, I'm an advertising solutions architect at Google. What it means is that I help our advertiser to build technical solutions that will help run their mobile app acquisition campaigns. So working closely with Aurélie on the French market, but I also support the Northern European market, for example.
Wow, very cool. So yeah, we have got no better people than to talk about this stuff for us today. I'm very excited, and like you said already, B, this is really to how Google products can really grow the studios through acquisition and the tools that you have. So I think I am excited to watch this one. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you if that's okay, and I will let you start off today's stream with your part of the presentation.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Kevin. Okay, so today in this masterclass, you will learn about how to grow your game with some of our Google Ads solutions. And Aurélie C will then focus specifically on Google Analytics 4 and Firebase to support user acquisition as well as re-engagement. So the first part will really be about how to leverage the different solutions that we have. And I wanted to make sure that you understand that we have a lot of powerful tools, and they cover the full game life cycle. So we have some great solutions which are very well integrated with part of Google Play tools to really focus on the pre-launch. We also have some very cool products we'll see today to really grow apps and games very quickly. And then we also have other tools which are more for engagement, re-engagement, working with audiences. And we won't go too deep into that today. So if you're interested, just feel free to leave some comments and we'll see what we could do on the engagement bit specifically. And again, as explained, so we have a lot to make sure that you can properly test your games and also reach users before the game go into full launch. And we will check that a bit later just in this session. And then we also have very powerful tools with a very big reach to actually help you get to the top charts and help you have a good number of profitable users. And why this is important? Because you really want to make sure that your game is proper and that you cover all of the main pillars that are super important. And specifically for Android, it's called Android Vitals. And it's important that they are being done properly. And then you really want to focus and invent on the launch phase as well, because this is where you will get the most profitable users and really the relevant installs. But okay, so let's start to dig into the pre-launch solutions. And today we will focus specifically on two of them, which are called open testing and pre-registration, because they are a cool bridge into some of the play features that we have, which are super relevant for developers and for gaming, but also into the app solutions, so the paid marketing solution that we have. So if you go into the Play console, you have specific ways of testing a product. You have the internal testing, which will allow you to reach up to 100 users. Then you can move into closed beta, which will allow you to have more users to test the game, and then into open testing. This is kind of how we see the setup and what we advise to follow in terms of frame. And open testing is a feature, again, available in Google Play. And what it will do is will allow you to reach to public testing, but without having any impact on your ratings. So it's pretty cool, because then you will be able to get all of the feedback, to check the Android vitals again, to check if there is any kind of technical things that you should change before actually going into a bigger scale. It's also helpful if you want to test into the App Store optimization, if you want to test different stuff on the store listing. And what also we advise to do is, if you run a bit of user acquisition on top of this, it will allow you to test on additional scale and to see if on the technical side of things everything is fine before going into full launch. You will also be able to understand the impact of kind of bigger tests on your KPIs. And again, I think it's also a good start to test different options on the store listing experiments. So we strongly advise to try that before going into full launch. And the second tool that we have, it's called pre-registration. And it's a bit more for casual games, but I think it's also super relevant for hybrid casual. And basically, it will allow you to have users pre-register on Google Play. And then you will be able to have a good list of kind of premium users before you go into full launch. And what you can do is you have the ability to actually enable this feature with a Google App Campaign, and we will see what are Google App Campaign just after, which will allow you to build a solid base of golden users before you actually go into full launch. So to be clear, pre-registration is available on Google Play. And then you can run an app campaign specifically for pre-registration, which will allow you to have a bigger base, bigger user, and bigger reach than only having the pre-registration by itself. So it's pretty powerful. And we specifically, just wanted to share how the ads would look like if you run app campaigns with pre-registration. So you would have some ads on the display, which is mainly your ad mom inventory, and also on Play. And you will see that you have this button, which will allow the user to pre-register. And it's very popular with Asian developers. And we had this example for Line Games that actually ran the test into the US. And they were really able to lower the cost and to have very good base and to really build on the buzz by leveraging this tool. So now we will focus a bit more into global launch. So once you are ready and confident with the soft launch and you want to scale, so everything that we do rely on machine learning. And our app campaign solution is one of the most sophisticated one because everything is automated, integrated, and it really, the algorithm that we have rely on the data that you get to be able to optimize and to drive performance towards the goal you select. So app campaign is really the ability to connect with the right user at the right time and at the right price. So it leverage kind of the signals that you send and that we get with machine learnings to be able to reach specific users. And what is super important to understand is that the reach is massive because it goes through the full inventory that we have. Here is an example for Android because it's also available for iOS. But for Android, you will be able to reach users in maybe 3 clicks, on the Google search inventory, Play, YouTube. You also have the display and the AdMob inventory that we have. So it's super strong. And the difference with iOS is that, of course, you won't be able to reach the App Store, but other than that, it's the same inventory. And we have multiple algorithms on top of the inventory and reach. So pre-registration, we already talked about it a bit. But what you can decide to do is optimize towards installs with cost per installs, towards actions, whether you decide that you want to reach users that have reached specific level or that have done specific action inside the game, or purchase if you have any. And then we have value, which is our return on ad spend algorithm. And you will be able to decide for $1, I want to get $2 or $3. I mean, of course, I'm making this up, it's up to you, but basically it really optimizes on value. And the solution is able to optimize on ad value as well as purchase value, depending on the integration that you make with the Firebase SDK or the measurement platform that you have. So how does it look for those that don't know anything about Google Ads? So basically you just have to create an account and then you can select create campaign, just select app promotion, and you will be able to check whether you want to run for app install, engagement, or app registration. And then you can just also select the OS and link to your app with just the ID. So it's very simple. One thing which is super important is measurements, because you need to be able to understand the impact on what you run, but also to feed the algorithm with the right signals. Aurélie will go deeper into that, specifically with the ecosystem changes that we have, but I just wanted to mention that it's available with Google Play, codeless tracking, so for Android only, but if you don't want to add any SDK, you can at least have a very basic version of App Campaign leveraging the Play data, but that will only be for installs only. Then you can move into Firebase, or you can also leverage some of the partners that we have for measurement, and you can see the full list here. And once you have this in place, the best practice and the tips that we advise is to at least cover 5 in-app events to be able to have a good overview of the funnel and the path that the user is taking and the behavior that they have. And this is the kind of ratio that we advise in between the installs and the kind of final events that you have. And also you want to have a bit of volume. So this is why it's great to be able to have a solid base of user before you go into more like scaling mode. And I'm just saying of pre-registered, for example, user, because you want to make sure that you unlock volume that will help you also get better performance overall for the app and be able to also reach the charts. What is super important and what you need to define is the bids, because basically you want to have a good balance in between the volume and the profitability. And you can do so by ensuring that you have a bid that will help you drive value and reach proper users. But you want to not have a too low bid, because it will just reduce a lot the impact and the reach of the campaigns. And because you have multiple sources of inventory, you also want to make sure that your ads go into all the type of inventories that we have. Then the budget, so you define a daily budget. And targeting, of course, you choose the geos, the languages that you want to have. You can run A/B tests, for example, geo-based. You could say, I want to understand how my game is and users perform on Brazil, for example, before going to the US, which is a bit more expensive market. And finally, the assets. So the assets are the creative, and you have two types. So you will be able to upload your own, but you also have what we call auto-generated. And basically, it's a combination of text, image, video that the tool makes to be able to get the top performance. And it leverage what you add inside the campaigns, the assets, but also some of your play store listing. So that's why it's very important as well to have a very proper store listing image and description before running any kind of paid marketing and paid acquisition. And this is what you also should have to be able to have the best creative and the best mix. Make sure you focus on the text because the text is still super important, specifically for the play and search inventory that we have. Images you can have in between 5 to 10. Videos up to 20. Portrait, landscape, and square. It's important to have everything to be able to go into the full range of inventory. And you can also consider testing HTML5. But I would advise to focus on videos, image, and text. And just one thing I want to make sure I mention, it's we have ad groups. So the limitation that you see for the image, for example, it's per ad group. And you can have you can have several ad groups, which just allow you to have a lot of creative and to test different stuff. We advise to have 5 ad groups max, because then otherwise it gets a bit messy and complicated, but it's really up to you. So just to wrap this section, we have a strong feature, whether it's on the Google Play platform, but also very well integrated with the measurement solutions that we have and partners, as well as the Google Ads solution. And we strongly advise to really focus on soft launch, pre-launch, and then you should be able to really scale with the automated solution that we have. And you don't have to spend a lot of time to do so. Basically, in several clicks, you are able to just be up and run. So it's definitely something that we think is super relevant to grow your games. And now that's it for me, and I will just let Aurélie Chazal focus a bit more on measurement and Firebase and Google Analytics SDK.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Well, that's so in depth. There's a lot of information there, and I'm going to tap you up for the slides so we can give that out when people ask for all that stuff. I think the pre-registration stuff for me was really interesting, and how you can build up that initial sort of pot of users before you start scaling up to bigger things. But I wanted to really focus in on that. The second to last slide, really, that it was about, you said about the store listing. Did I understand that right? That you sort of scrape the store listing and do different combinations to find the optimal advert. Did I understand that right?
Yeah. So store listing, well, I think the first thing I would advise is really to run A/B testing on store listing because it's very easy. And then Google Ads will leverage some of the store listing, like descriptions and the image, the icon that you have, into the creative and the assets. So you want to make sure that you have something proper and that you also localize for each market, because otherwise it can impact your creative. And everything is automated, so you won't be able to, it's just performance based. It will
Right.
just get the best type of asset for a specific user at a specific time.
Yeah, that's crazy. And you said that there's up to, I mean, there's tons of stuff you can add within each ad group. Can you have a separate set of 5 ad groups for each country?
Yes, correct.
Wow. Okay. So that kind of just goes to show how robust the whole thing is, that you could just like go right into the minutiae of everything, and it's pretty insane. I don't think many people will get to look inside of exactly how the setup goes and the whole sort of funnel of getting people interested in your game before the release. Very cool indeed. That's yeah, I'd really love to get those slides as well, because I think that's really interesting to see the whole journey and what you can do. I think it's probably best at this point to hand over to already C and seeing how the next part fits into place. All right, let's do that.
Yeah. Perfect. So yeah, already B talked to you about the media side of things. So what type of solutions we have, for example, like Google Ads to promote your app. What I'm going to focus on now is a bit more the measurement side of things. So you can use our measurement solutions like Google Analytics 4 and Firebase to support the acquisition and re-engagement of your users. So measurement pretty much is the base that you're going to build for your business. So we love acronyms in the gaming industry, but key metrics that you usually would track would be things like ROI, return on investment, or ARPU, the average revenue per users. And that's essentially the metrics that are going to tell you whether your game and your campaigns that you use to acquire users are working well. So are people staying in the game? Are people seeing ads and generating revenue for you? Are they spending money in your game? So it's really the base for everything. And then you build on top of that. So the base that you build with your measurement will power your user acquisition, but it also powers a lot of the other features that you use outside of paid media. So things like push notifications or feature customization. So like harder levels, easier levels, etc. So I'm going to focus on the measurement piece. And one thing that's happening right now in the industry and for apps is that the world of measurement is changing. And it's not only for apps, it's been happening on the web as well. We have a lot of platform changes like iOS 14.5 and the ATT changes that Apple released, but also regulations like GDPR in EU and a lot of other regulation across the world that are focusing on bringing more privacy. And that impacts how we can measure things. So we're used to measure things at a very granular level for a long time, meaning that we know each user, where they came from, what they're doing in the app. And that's changing because with more privacy comes more limitations to how we can track someone across platforms. For us on the app world, it means less access to device IDs, for example, with IDFS on iOS. For the web, it means less access to third-party cookies. But essentially, the result is the same, is that we have to find new solutions. We have to find new sort of data to rely on. For example, aggregated measurement like the SKAd network, the use of first-party data like emails. And that's changing how we do things. What we see with our advertisers and with the companies that we work with is that it brings a set of challenges, all those changes. And I choose to focus on 3. There's a lot more than that. But it brings challenges with media activation. So essentially knowing what campaigns to run and how effective those campaigns are. With cross-platform analytics, so knowing who a user is, whether they're playing on mobile or on their PC. And then there's a lot of interest around predictive analytics, but it often takes a lot of resources and a lot of time to build those models that will predict, for example, LTV and this type of metrics. So this is things that we're addressing or trying to address in Google Analytics 4 and with Firebase, and to make it easier, especially for smaller companies, to overcome those challenges and to maybe catch up or like try have the resources that those bigger companies have that can put a lot of resources towards, for example, building their own machine learning models. So I talk about Google Analytics 4 and Firebase just to explain a little bit how those two play together. Firebase is the SDK that we use to put the analytics that goes into Google Analytics 4. So Google Analytics 4 is the platform where you will have the visualization, and Firebase is the SDK that we use to collect the data. And Analytics 4 also has a web component, which is the tracking that we do through the G tag. And it puts the app measurement and the web measurement together into this platform called Google Analytics 4, which is the new version of Google Analytics. How it looks like, the measurement. So what we will track through the SDK in Firebase is that you would track events, so actions that people are taking into your app, and user dimensions, which is dimension specific to a user. So for example, preferred payment method, or what level a user is at the moment. So things that are not specifically an action, but that help to know a bit more about the user, like gender, age, this type of things. And with the events, so your actions and criteria about the users, you can build audiences. So essentially groups of users that you would then use for retargeting, for example, in a media campaign. And the good thing with Firebase is that if you're developers, you're probably familiar with some of the other features of Firebase. So I know, for example, Crashlytics is a very popular feature to do some crash analytics and testing, so to identify some issues and bugs with the app and correct them. And analytics is integrated with all of those features, or some of those features where relevant, where it provides a bit more data to understand your crashes better, but also, for example, with remote config, which is changing your app without having to republish codes. Analytics helps target specific groups of users with a special remote configuration, but it also helps target push notifications, all those other features outside of Google Ads, for example. So it's a lot wider than just an analytics that integrates with media platforms. It integrates also with all those developer features that you would use to re-engage your users. So coming back to the main challenges that I mentioned, media activation, the cross-platform, and predictive analytics, I want to go just a bit deeper into each of those and present some of the features that we have to help address them. So if we look at media activation, which is more or less what Aurélie covered, so for example, using Google Ads to acquire new users, it integrates with Firebase and with Google Analytics to help you essentially run better media or help boost the performance that you get on Google Ads. And that's done through a set of different features. And I kind of summarized here some of the main ones, which is you would have exclusive features like the ability to bid on TROAS, so target return on ad spend. So Aurélie mentioned you would say that for every $1 that I spend, I want to get back $2 in revenue. Or it also allows you to have some features that marketers can use without needing a developer. So for example, creating new events for tracking or for optimization without having to code into the app or to release the app again. So a bit like Google Tag Manager does on the web, but that's integrated within analytics. A better campaign performance, because since we know exactly how the structure for events and tracking works like in Google Analytics, we're able to build machine learning models for campaigns that are based on those event naming conventions, for example. And finally, one that's very the talk of the moment is privacy safe measurement. So how to overcome some of the limitations that I mentioned with the loss of device ID. So I will go a bit more in depth for each of those. So the first one for TROAS bidding. So that's something we've worked quite extensively on with HomaJam. And it's essentially taking your campaigns from bidding on a target's cost per install, which you would assume every install is pretty much worth the same. So you say for an install, I can pay up to 20 cents because that's where I get my return. TROAS bidding allows you to be a bit more flexible than that. And instead of just passing an install, you would pass the actual ad revenue that you make from your games. And you allow the campaign to say okay, so this user is generating a lot more revenue because they're playing for 10 days and they're seeing a lot more ads than this one user that's staying only for 1 day and seeing a lot less ads and generating less revenue. So what our system can do is that then it can say, oh, this one user that is staying for 10 days, this profile of user is more valuable for you, so we can bid more to acquire them, meaning that you might have passed on this user before with a TCPI bid where you said, I only can pay 10 cents per install. But with TROAS, since we know this user is going to be more valuable, we say, okay, we can bid actually a bit more than that because they're going to bring revenue. So it takes the burden out of you to make complex calculation. It just treats every user differently based on the actual revenue that you will get. And in Firebase, it's actually quite simple to set up. So you can either optimize based on in-app purchases, so that's tracked automatically once you put the SDK in place. Or you can optimize based on ad revenue, like I mentioned, which for AdMob, it's an integration with AdMob without code needed. But for other mediation platform, it's a simple event that you can tag, and we have code snippets for all the main mediation platform, like AppLovin, for example, in our help center. And then you could also have totally custom events. So if we look outside of gaming, for example, we have e-commerce purchases, this type of events. So that was for TROAS. And then I mentioned also another part or another big focus for Google Analytics 4 is how can we empower data teams or, like, let's say marketing teams to be able to manage events and audiences and things that they want to use to test and reactivate and activate media without having to rely too much on developer resources or taking too much of the developer resources from the company and having to code every event, etc., in the app directly. So we launched this feature called codeless event editing and creation. So it's, as I said, very similar to Google Tag Manager if you're familiar with it on the web. It essentially allows you to create a new event based on the current data that you track. So a good example would be, let's say you wanted to try a campaign that's aimed at attracting only users that make bigger purchases. So you track all your purchases by default with the SDK, but you would want to only optimize towards users that make purchases above $10, for example. Then you could create an event like that with this feature to use in your campaign and to test without having to do any coding in the app. And it means you can also easily remove that event if it doesn't work out and you don't want it in the app and it's not useful to you. So it's a lot more flexible. You can do that in about like 5-10 minutes, create it, and then same, like delete it, try another event pretty easily. For the better performance piece in the campaigns, it has to do with, as I said, the event naming conventions. So the good thing with Google Analytics and Google Ads is that, so we have naming conventions for events in analytics that Google Ads understands, meaning that we have recommended events and automatically collected events like a session start, a first open, that are always called the same and track the same thing. So Google Ads can easily optimize towards it or use those events to optimize towards deeper events. So giving a practical example, so let's say you want to optimize your campaign to bring people who are more likely to make purchases. A good proxy to know if someone is going to get engaged and make a purchases is how often they come back to the app or how many sessions they have. So with this standardized event naming and convention, what we can do in Google Ads is that we can use the session start data to predict if someone is likely to make a purchase. Because if we see they have, I don't know, like 20 sessions in a few days, then it means they're quite engaged. So they might be likely to then make a purchase. Same with standard events that we recommend tracking, like Level Up, all those events. So if you have to take anything out of this slide, is that we have recommended events, and I will put in a link if we share the slides so you can check them out. We recommend to have as many of those events implemented in your app in order for the performance impact to be visible in Google Ads. And the final one that I mentioned was around the privacy challenges that we have and what we're doing to address them. So we have a solution called that was just published, I believe, 4 weeks ago. It's called iOS on-device measurement. And it's a new way for us to regain a little bit of data about conversions that users do on iOS devices where they haven't consented to the ATT prompt, so where we don't have an IDFA. How it works is quite simple. So it uses email addresses, and basically the system is that you would pass email addresses that you collect from your customers to the SDK, and then we will compare it with the email addresses we have from our own customer base or user base, so people that are logged into like YouTube, for example. And we will do the matching on device, so the data, the email address never leaves the device. And what is then sent to Google Ads and to analytics is just an anonymous and aggregated matching, saying, for example, that there's a conversion that happened, but we don't know who the person that made the conversion is. So anonymized data that the conversion happened, and then we aggregate the results on our side. The main impact of this feature is that it allows us to regain a bit of ground truth in terms of conversions that happen on iOS, so we can train our models to continue optimizing campaigns towards your goals. So that was for the media side of things. There's a lot more features, but yeah, what I will do is I will add some links if you're interested to go a bit deeper. I covered some of the most popular. And the second part that I wanted to cover is the cross-platform analytics. So that's the main selling point, I would say, of Google Analytics 4. It's more on the web side of things, I would say, than for pure app companies like gaming companies. But I think it's becoming more and more of interest for gaming. And the reason why is that there was this study published recently by Unity that I found quite interesting, where they surveyed a group of multiplayer gamers and they asked them essentially on which platform they were playing. And it turns out that about 87 of those players have played a cross-platform game, so a game that was both on app and on PC. And about 44% of those played on both mobile and console without having a preference for either of those. And finally, like about 43% said that they would love to see more cross-platform game options. And what we're seeing in the industry on our side is that we're seeing a lot of companies now making their mobile games into a PC game. And we have solutions coming, like with Android, for example, to enable that. So I think it's going to become a bit more prominent in the future. And the analytics on the website of things, so for example, for a PC game, is so different from what we're used to in the app world. That's Google Analytics 4, which is like typically a very web heavy platform. It's been like one of the major solution on the web, is bringing a unique point of selling here, where it's a platform that has the web tracking already in place, but also has the app tracking now, so you can track users across the two streams or the two platforms. And how it does that is that it has the same naming conventions across app and web, meaning that you can easily see purchases across both platforms mixed in one. So you can see the revenue, for example, at a user level, no matter if they played in your app or on PC. And that is enabled also by solutions to recognize a user, so IDs that will help recognize a user across different platforms. And those two IDs are the ones that you see at the top and on the left. So Google Signals, which is us using our own user data to essentially recognize someone that plays on their phone versus then when they play on PC. That's with logged in Google data. So that's fully aggregated data that we report for privacy reasons. And then there's an option for you to pass your own user ID. So that's probably more for like casual to mid-core games. But if users were logged in, for example, to save their progress, then you would have a user ID associated to them, and you could pass that to Google Analytics so that we're able to recognize them no matter if they play on tablet, on Android phone, on iOS, or on their computer. And that shows you an aggregate user journey or consolidated user journey that makes it easier to analyze who is bringing revenue, essentially, or which platform is bringing revenue. And finally, the last point that I had, or the last challenge that we help address, is the whole predictive analytics business. So I don't know if you're familiar with building predictions or predictive models, but it usually takes quite a lot of resources. So we have very advanced products on Google Cloud that help to do your own models, things like machine learning models, like AutoML, for example, is one of those products that help build your own custom model with some assistance. But what GA4 and Firebase try to do is to make it even more democratic, let's say, to build models that are automated and that will make predictions for you without you having to have a data scientist tweak the features and essentially like build the whole model for you. Obviously, those models are not as custom, so they might not work as well for everyone, but they're a very good starting point. If you're a small company, you don't have the resources to invest into having like a whole team of data scientists. And I will go through a few of those that I think are interesting to start with. So what we do at the moment is that we build three sorts of predictions. So we build a purchase probability. So how likely is someone to purchase in the next 7 days? Then we build a churn probability. How likely is someone to stop using your app, which here means that they will just not come back, but they might not have uninstalled it. So it's independent from install or uninstall in the next 7 days as well. And then finally, a revenue prediction, which is we try to predict the revenue a user will generate in the next 28 days and who are your top percentile of users in terms of the revenue they will generate. And those predictions at the moment can be used in audiences, meaning that you could build an audience of everyone who is most likely to churn in the next 7 days, and then re-engage those users with a special promotion or just like a special offer, or maybe an easier level, a tutorial, etc. And then finally, we also have, you can just build analytics and reports with those predictions just to see from different media channels, what are the predictions on those users? Are they predicted to be high value users or lower value in average? And so that was more like on the media side with the audiences. But you can also use those audiences and those predictions with developer features or non-media features. Let's say, for example, push notifications or in-app messaging. So you could target, like I said, people who are likely to churn with a push notification to bring them back to the app, either with a special offer or just with a special messaging. Or you could target people who are likely to spend with a message in-app, for example, with a 5% cashback or a special message on the store when they visit the page. We've seen very good success with that, with companies that have tried. We've seen, for example, with the churn notifications, they've seen like good reduction in churn after trying to target those predicted users. And it's usually low barrier of entry, meaning you can just build the audience. It's almost pre-built in, and then the push notification feature in Firebase is also a feature that you can get access to quite easily. Same with in-app messaging. And finally, that will be the final slides. We have, that's a new feature that was announced, I believe, earlier this year or late last year. So there's a feature called remote config in Firebase that allows you to modify your app without having to republish code changes. So it's a remote configuration type of feature. And we built some predictive analytics and predictive features on top of that, which is that you can have a remote configuration that will automatically optimize towards a certain goal. So let's say you have a configuration for the difficulty of a level. With this feature, what you could do is that you say, my goal is to have people attain level 5 or retain for 2 days. And the system will automatically assign the level difficulty to each user based on how likely we think they are to reach level 5 or retain for a few more days, depending on the level that we show. So for users who prefer easier levels, the system will automatically show them or assign them easier levels. For people who prefer to be a bit more challenged, they will automatically assign them harder levels. So I took an example with level, which can be tricky, but it can be done with anything else, like color of a button or price in the store, or how you display the different items in the store. And what it does is it just personalizes the experience for each user depending on what we predict they will do with the different features. So to summarize, good measurement is essential, but it's becoming very difficult in the industry across app and web to have very detailed and granular measurements. And that's why GFR and Firebase are here to try and take away some of the difficulty by providing some features like predictions and make it easier if you don't have the resources to build your own models. Building up on privacy-safe measurement like the iOS on-device, integrating with analytics dev features like the push notifications and remote config, and finally enabling a seamless integration with Google Ads so that your campaigns can perform better from the data you get from Firebase and analytics. And that's going to be it for me.
Oh my goodness. There is so much in there. I'm trying to keep up with it, and it's like it's blowing my mind. It's like I'm very conscious of staying in my lane here and not. There's so much I wanted to ask, and I feel like every slide there could have been a presentation in of itself, and you could have gone deeper and deeper. One thing that I did pick up on was, I think, a couple of things. Most of it was the prediction stuff that I find really fascinating. The other thing is like how you identify certain users that potentially would go outside the scope of your bid range because it wouldn't, on the surface, feel like there would be, you wouldn't get the ROAS on that, but you can figure out that actually over the length of time they would be a good user to acquire. So is there, I guess what I'm trying to ask ultimately is, what is the data set? How many users would you need within your own app or game to make this stuff really relevant? And we're coming from a user base that don't have a huge marketing budget, and they want to get going, and they can see all the fancy stuff that you guys, it's Google, come on, all they want to take advantage of all this stuff, but they need that. They how much do they have to spend to get a meaningful data from this?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know how much on the spend, but what we say is that you need at least 10 events a day for models to work well. So let's say, for example, you optimizing for purchases is the common example. You would need 10 purchase a day to come from the campaign in order for the models to be able to say like, oh, those type of users are valuable.
Okay.
So yeah, with ad revenue, I think it might be easier because you just get a lot of ad impressions. It's very easy to reach those thresholds. Like 10 impressions a day is nothing.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a good answer. And I think that's how it's helpful, because a lot when we're working, Homer's working with you guys to like, I'm glad it's not me, by the way, but the department's working with all this really super clever stuff. Takes a lot of the lifting out. But for you, for people watching who have their own games that maybe didn't make some of the numbers and they wanted to keep working on them to improve them, I think this all sounds like such a good solution to. There's nothing you haven't thought of from what I can think of. What do you think's a really good piece of advice for anybody wanting to get started? Like, where should they really start? What would be the best use of their time to concentrate on? I mean,
Yeah, no, that's a good question. There's like so much that can be done. So I would
sure.
say like the main things that need to be in place is the very basics of measurement is tracking your installs, so your first open, which is something that most SDKs will do by default, so Firebase or another measurement platform, and then tracking the revenue generating events. So may it be an ad impression or a purchase or a subscriptions, just having those in place. Because once that's there, you can get most of your metrics in there, like ROI, ARPU, etc. And you can optimize your campaigns in a very smart way.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess this one's for you, already, B. How sort of the same sort of question in terms of spend. If we wanted to do like a pre-launch type, I'm just starting out. I just want to try and do a pre-launch, trying to get a minimum sort of buzz and feel of the platform and stuff. What would you? Is there a minimum amount you could spend to make it worthwhile? If I put $50, is that really going to help me? So what's the sort of figure you'd recommend?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. There is no minimum, and it also really depends on the market that you target. Of course, the US would be more expensive than some countries of Southeast Asia. If you want to really drive volume in the Philippines or Vietnam, that would be less expensive. But usually, the thing that you want to balance is how much revenue you make with the game versus how much you invest to acquire users. So if with your $50 you made twice or three times what you invest, you will probably have more money to invest and get more money after. And this is kind of the model that the partner we work with have. So I would definitely, if you have 50, I would definitely recommend to really think of the market and balance how much they will bring of valuable users with how much you invest. And then you can also think of strategies around seasonality. For example, if you want to, I think one good example could be India. If you want to specifically invest there, and you can have a higher ad pressure, for example, and then you can really understand how much you get from ad revenue versus how much you invest. And maybe you want to focus on specific local events, such as Diwali, where you would also have lots of organic volume. So I think you could really think about very smart strategies that you can run, and you can definitely start with a lower budget and start building and scaling with that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think would you? Oh, I'm just going to put is $50. Would $50 be enough to get me started on a campaign in India, to gather enough data and see whether or not there are certain things working in my game?
Yeah, I see. I cannot say for sure because then it will depend on the game. It will depend
Sure,
on the
of course.
seasonality. It depends on lots of things, but I would definitely test that.
Okay, that's great. I mean, that's kind of where I was starting. Like, because there's so much information here, it's slightly overwhelming, which is why I said I'd love to get the slides, because it goes so you can sort of, to get the overall picture is, I think most people watching this gets it, but going deeper into it, it's like fascinating how much of a rabbit hole you can go down, and how much do I need to understand everything at once, I guess. And that initial budget that I put out to get some meaningful data. And of course, if I spend one and get three back, I'm printing money at this point, which gives me more to invest back and use the stuff more. All right, I think that's going to go and wrap it up for me, because it's too overwhelming for my small brain. I'll got to be honest. I think what would be really nice if we can find out exactly what's the best action for us today. Where do we go to? Is it google.com Firebase, or where should we go to get started with both analytics and Firebase? To already B or C, is there a link, or well, we will provide a link on the replay thing, but is there any easy search we can do to go down and download the SDKs today? Is kind of where I'm going.
Yeah, so you can go to firebase.com, I believe it will be, or you can look up Google Analytics for Firebase, is the specific SDK that will help to put the measurement in place. And then you'll find the developer resources with Get Started and all the steps.
Awesome. Well, I would highly recommend. We will provide a link for that, of course. And yeah, thank you so much both for all the work you put into your presentations today. I really appreciate it. It's super fascinating to me. It's so amazing how deep it all goes, and the stuff you can do, especially with the machine learning and stuff. it's pretty bonkers. I think it's so clever, and yeah. With all that said and done, thank you so much. Is there, if people want to get in touch with you real quick, what's the best way that they can reach out to you to say thanks for coming on today? Is there an email we can use for you, or something public that you don't mind sharing if they got a question they want to reach out to you directly, or is there a generic email we can send people to that could get an answer?
Well, I think for me, LinkedIn would be the easier. Like,
Perfect. Yeah, LinkedIn's great.
my name and send a message.
Lovely.
Yeah, same with me. There should be only one Aurélie Chazal at Google. So.
All right, awesome. So if you want to reach out to Aurélie C or B, you can do so via LinkedIn's the best channel. And of course, look out in your inbox where we'll send you some of the links to download the slideshows. But that's going to wrap it up from us today. Thank you once again for joining with me and doing your presentations. I got a ton out of it. It blew my brain off, but it was really cool. And thanks again for joining us and being the sponsor on the jam for us this time.
Thanks, Kevin. It was
thanks for having us.
All right, we'll say goodbye now then. So see you later, everybody. Thanks for joining with
Bye.
us. Thank you. Bye-bye.